when we talk about empathy, of course, means I'm not going to talk about the basics of sympathy, empathy, and all that, because you are already crossed that particular level. And so when we talk about empathy, means we always talk about, okay, going into the shoes of the other person and then feel their feelings and all that. Of course, means I'm not saying that it is not a right part of the empathy, but uh, uh, we can say that the empathy is basically our cognitive and the thinking capacity to understand and adapt to different perspectives, right? So there is a something diverse, something different, something dissimilar, something unknown. And when we face that thing, we cognitively think and understand and adapt to that situation. We try to understand that situation is a part of empathy. So the empathy is not only about emotions or that, right? So the empathy is also about the diversity. Empathy is about diversity. Empathy is about inclusion. Empathy is about you becoming open to the different perspectives, different thoughts, different belief system is also part of the empathy. Is what point I want to take home. I want you to take home. Empathy is also to self-regulate our behavior and emotions, keeping in track of the origins of the thoughts, emotions, and the behavior. See, no, okay, so this is a bit complex. So, empathy is you will regulate your behavior while being true to the origins of those emotions and the feelings in yourself and in the other person. So now in the first point, I told you that it is more of the means one of the facets of the empathy is cognitive and the thinking in nature. In the second point, I want to drive home the point that the empathy is about authenticity. Empathy is not necessarily about the techniques. That is, okay, I will have these techniques and all that, and then I will become more empathetic. Not necessarily, right? Because, and I'm going to explain this into detail. Right now, I'm just giving you the brief of what is going to come, and I'm going to go deep into this particular point. But my point is being authentic to your own emotions, feelings, and the thought processes as well as the others, means origin of our feelings and emotions. We need to true to that, right? We need to be true to you. We need to remain true to that is also the point related to the empathy. So this is a facet of empathy. So the empathy definition is big. I am just expanding the definition of empathy. The definition of the empathy, I don't want you to limit to understanding the feelings and the emotions of the others, or go into their feelings and the emotions and that, right? So I'm just expanding that definition. Empathy is also about your emotional capacity to respond and sensibly react. So the sensibly react is respond only. So why it is different? Why it is different to sensibly react? Because many times we react based on our understanding, our behavioral profile. If we are very positive, right, our reaction to that particular person's sadness will be to boost his or her positivity, right? So we tend to see the world from our perspective. So when I say the sensibly react, means I mean to say reaction from that particular person's perspective is also the part of empathy. I'm just expanding the definition of empathy now. So the empathy is also about you understanding the other person's behavioral pattern and you sensibly reacting, oblique responding. So the responding is actually sensibly reacting. When we talk about empathy, sensibly reacting for the other person, not only to the other person. For the other person means you will take into consideration that person's cultural background, that person's behavioral pattern, and your response will suit to that particular person and not necessarily your own preferences, belief systems, and the behavioral pattern. Empathy also, the last facet, what I want to talk to you about the empathy is also about your social capacity to share emotions appropriately, of course. So the empathy is a social skills, right? So in emotional intelligence, we already seen when it comes to the self, it is self-awareness and self-management. When it comes to others, it is about social awareness, oblique empathy, and social skills. So the empathy is about your social skills. So it is also your ability or your capacity, right? Your social capacity to share emotions appropriately, which many times we feel it either not necessary or not appropriate, or we don't know how to basically share emotions. We know how to share thoughts. Again, I'm talking generically, means if few of you are very fluent in that, it is great, but I'm just making a generic statement that it is easier for us to share thoughts, but it is difficult for us to share real emotions, especially in a social settings. In one-to-one settings, still it is possible. Generally, in a coaching scenarios, there is a coach and coachee, and it's a very, I can say, the trusted, say, relation, and it's a process, right? So there, sharing emotions is not that difficult, right? Means I'm not saying it is easy. That also requires a say atmosphere of safety, trust, and variety of the things are required. But still, it is not that difficult. But in a social setting, how to express emotions is a challenge. That is also part of the empathy, right? So I have enlarged the definition of the empathy by first making it also the cognitive and the thinking ability to adapt to the different perspectives, belief systems, and the thought processes and cultures is one aspect of the one element of empathy. Another element of the empathy, to be true to your own and the other person's feeling and be authentic, is also one part of the empathy. The third is how to sensibly respond, sensibly react or the respond to the other person, considering that other person's cultural background and the behavioral profile is the third aspect of the empathy. And the fourth aspect is how to share emotions, how to convey emotions in a social settings is also part of the empathy. Why? Because you need to be sensitive towards the other person's emotions when you share your own emotions, right? So this is also part of it. So the empathy is a very broad concept. It is not only putting ourselves into the shoes of the others and not only understanding other person's feelings and emotions, but it is beyond that, is the point I just wanted to make before we start the session. So I'm going to talk about these four aspects, and human beings are hardwired for empathy. So my statement is human beings are hardwired. So when I say the hardwired means I'm talking about the wiring in the brain, are hardwired for empathy. How? Traditionally, means if we talk about our say reptilian brain, human beings have developed this. See, the human beings are not the biggest or the fiercest of the animals on the planet. There used to be many big animals, many fearsome animals, and there are many fearsome animals, right? And human beings practically don't have anything, right, other than their brain to really compete with many animals, because many animals have more power, more physical power, more fight power than human beings, right? So the traditionally human beings have developed, our reptilian brain has been developed for collaboration, cooperation, and this was the reason why human beings were working in tribes. So this mentality of the tribes, this mentality of the group dynamics is so it's a part of the anthropology. right? So when you study anthropology, you will understand that is how human beings have developed, how our culture, belief systems have developed, how our psychology has developed. So this is all the part of the subject called as anthropology, which is again there in our postgraduate program. Where and there's a purpose. Why? Because once you understand anthropology, once we understand our roots, it becomes easier for us to empathize. We understand that is okay, means why we behave the way we behave, right? How means we have evolved, right? So this is the logic. So our brain has been wired for collaboration. Our brain also have been wired for something called as mirror neurons. Not only our, right? Some comparatively developed animals also have this particular, say, competence, wherein so what is this mirror neuron? Mirror neuron is a neurotic system inside our brain which senses, it is called as, like, not called as, it is like a telepathy, which senses other person's intentions and feelings and emotions without that other person saying those or using a language to communicate. So when I say the language to communicate means the body language as well as the words. So I'm talking about both, right? So without that person communicating, our brain have this ability to understand that particular person's, of course, means uh, with some observation. I'm not necessarily talking about it telepathy with a large distance. Of course, that also that competency also is there within us. But right now, I'm not talking about that. Right now, I'm talking about why I'm saying that our brains have been hardwired for this empathy. Is that so? There was a study done on the say monkeys. So in 1990s, this particular study was done on monkeys, but at that time it was not done on human beings, right? In last decade, the real development has happened whereby inserting electrodes as well as with fMRI studies, right? With the scanning and all that, with all these processes, now they have concluded that whatever in 1990s they have seen in, say, brain of a monkey, that similar thing happens in the brain of human being also. So they were Italian researchers who found that individual neurons in the brain of one particular type of monkey that fired in both the monkeys when the monkeys grab an object, and also when monkeys watch one another when they grab the same object. Means, for example, I'm there is a fruit. Just take example of a fruit. So the monkey, one monkey is basically grabbing a fruit. So at that time, there is some kind of brain activity. So they have seen this particular, some neurons are getting fired when this monkey is grabbing that fruit. Now they studied the another monkey separately, and they found the same neurons in the same place in the brain gets fired when the monkey is grabbing that fruit. Now when they created an environment where the both monkeys were seeing each other, and when one monkey was grabbing that particular fruit, right, and another monkey was not grabbing, but that another monkey was having the same neuron firing in the brain which was related to you grabbing the fruit, but now you are not grabbing the fruit. You means the another person is grabbing the fruit, but you are only seeing it. So this is the power of brain. So what brain does, brain tries to connect, right? And this then they saw in the human beings also, that the human beings, and this is again explained in our uh, uh, scriptures and all that. So this is a system called as aura. Like this means if you see our photographs of the god, right? Gods in means Hinduism, there are multiple gods, for example, and they have this particular bright light behind their head. So it is basically their aura, aura. In normal human beings, it is not that say power. It is not that powerful. So we are not in a position to see it with the naked eyes, but that aura exists, and that aura basically connects, right? So of course, means again means we have already seen in Vedant that is we are all part of the pure consciousness, and anyway there is a direct connection between all the human beings. Apart from that, apart from the say topic of the pure consciousness, even at an individual level, this aura plays a very important role in this particular connection. So the what point I am driving here necessarily is we are all having all the technology within us, within our body and mind, which makes us empathic human beings. We are already empathic. But what has happened that somehow our education system, upbringing, and our view towards the world has differentiated that this is rational and this is emotional, and the emotional is practically opposite to rational. So this is what we have perceived. I'm not saying our teachers have actually taught us in this same language, but somehow the entire impact of our education system and upbringing is more on a rational and logical thinking side and less on the emotional thinking side. So step by step, and see the beauty or the limitation of the brain is if you don't use few of the things in the brain uh, removes that particular competence, and brain will develop that competence for which you need the support of the brain, right? So what brain does, that is there are some neurons in one particular part of the brain, they have some function, but if you are not using that function, right, and the brain system is very efficient and effective system, so what brain does, right, so the brain basically defocuses its attention on that particular part, so that particular parts means practically dies, and brain uses its power into the area where you need more of the brain's help. So our upbringing and the education system has reduced our natural ability to connect. Means, for example, the baby has a natural ability to connect without the language, right? That is our DNA. Our DNA is that is without the language, without the spoken words, right? We are in a position to not only connect with the other person, but send messages to each other. This is our natural ability. But since we are not using it, right, we are not in a position to flourish that particular ability. So the neuroscience says very clearly that as human beings, we are naturally empathetic, and we naturally have this particular ability to connect with each other. And the people who have already attended my workshop on this particular neuroscience, so wherein I have also talked about the neuroplasticity, and it is not necessary that I have to talk and then you will learn. Anyway, you will know it, or you go to the YouTube or the Google, you will get all the information about the neuroplasticity. So even if you have not used those particular connection, and at a later point in time you decide that okay, now I want to use this particular power of my brain, right, the brain is plastic enough, not immediately, means it requires a repeated consistent efforts from your side, but if you are in a position to do it, the brain will develop that particular connection ability. Human brain is miracle. It's mystery as well as miracle. If you think that is okay, I want to become an empathetic human being and I want to harness this power of connecting with the other person, I want this particular power to understand the thoughts, feelings, and the emotions of the other person without even talking to that particular person, it is possible. So this possibility is what I am just highlighting in the point number 1. My point number 2 is empathy in 21st century. The 21st century means, especially now, because now we already know COVID and all that, and we are knowing about the social media for the last decade. So the 21st century, apart from the variety of the other things, has two major changes. One change is our lookout, or our, say, pattern of managing our social interactions have changed. The earlier pattern of our social interactions were physical meetings. Practically, when you when we were children, means I'm talking about majority of us when we were children, means for the people in their 40s now can understand. That is, when we were children, during the vacations, we used to go to each other's homes, to our relatives' homes, right? So it was a totally different culture of the vacation. I'm I'm talking about how many years before? So I'm talking about say 30 years before, practically, right? So the 30-40 years before, the culture was vacations means going to your mother's brother or your uncle or your relative, and they also, means it was a reciprocal thing. So our entire culture was developed with a great intelligence of how to establish the relationship and how to maintain the relationship. So the idea behind this was what? That is okay. At least once a year, you will have a very close interaction. So this was all the idea behind the culture. This was the idea behind the many of the rituals. So the many of the rituals in our culture were developed for the social connections in mind. So the idea was not the ritual. The idea was, before that particular ritual, people will meet each other. So this is the importance of meeting each other, because that is the human need. That is how the human is wired. We need touch. We need this particular feeling. We need this touch, right? We need this touch with the nature as well. This was the reason why our during the vacations we used to go to the places which were close to the nature. Again, very scientific, and I'm going to come to that particular point uh, uh, after some time. So from that particular culture, now we are in the culture that the vacation means not going to each other's houses. Vacations means going foreign, going abroad, right? Take your family and the friends, right, and go to some exotic destination. Is now our definition of the vacation. Our definition of the vacation is not to go to uncles and the mamas or some kind of relatives, right? So now in 21st century, there is a change. Of course, with every change, there are pros and cons, and there is a solution as well. I'm not saying that this is bad or something like that, because whatever is the reality is reality. So we are going to accept the reality. Means we are not cribbing, oh, world has become bad or something like that. So this is not at all my intention. My intention is to, what is the change? So now the change is, this is the definition. And now the major change is the physical connection or the physical touch has replaced with the social messages, in whether it is a birthday or whether it is anything. So now, because of the social media, of course there are some pros as well. Again, I'm not saying that these are the bad things. I'm just throwing light on the reality, right? So the reality is, now the social media is dominating our social interactions. Undoubtedly in the entire world where internet is prevalent, Right now, internet reach in the entire world is 70%, out of which 52% of the world has proper internet. So the reach is 70%, but the 52% of the world has proper internet facilities. That means majority of the world has a proper internet connection. And that means majority of the world is now dependent on the social media for their social connections. In the world dominated by the social media, the empathy has taken the backseat. Again, I will explain you it very simply, and you already know it. I'm just building the case. Means, not that I am giving you some information which you already don't know. You know it, but I'm just building the case. For example, if you have to say something insensitive, right? You will not bother it saying, or you even will not think twice before putting any insensitive remarks on a social media. There are a variety of the reasons. Reason number one is there is no person in front of you, right, to in whose eyes you have to see and then say something, right? Because when the person is in front of you, you will be 10 times more cautious about that person's persona, that person's feelings, that person's emotions. Is what we are wired like that. But if that person is not in front of you, right, you don't feel that particular empathy in you. It's a process, it's an issue of the process. So the social media process is less empathetic, or it it is not built with empathy. Social media process is not built with empathy, is my statement, right? And it is truth, right? Why it is truth? Because if you see our emojis, what are those emojis which we generally use? We all use, including me, right? Whether it is WhatsApp or whether it is Facebook or even your okay, inside don't use much, but again the Facebook and the Insta are similar only, and then LinkedIn. So either the laughing or smiling and all that, again it doesn't have any nuances of emotions and the feelings, right? I mean, they are so immaturely, of course, means I don't want to say it immaturely, because if I also develop it, I don't have any solution. So there is no point in I blaming the developer or something like that. But what I mean to say, they are inadequately designed. So not immaturely, the right word is inadequately designed. They do not actually reciprocate the true feelings and emotions. Because of that, do you know what has happened? We are becoming, not we have, because still it's a I can say the QC stage, right? As far as our generation is concerned, or the current humanity is concerned, now we are getting wired of putting emotions in a very broad bracket and not to go into the depth of the emotions. And during, especially within the social media, what is now happening is that we are finding it very easy to basically offer any negative statement or the negative feedback to the other person, because that person is in person. That person is not visible to me. So I'm not automatically getting sensitive. So my mirror neurons are not firing. My mirror neurons fire when I see the person. In the monkey example, the other monkey was seeing the other monkey holding an object. That fired mirror neurons, right? So when I'm not seeing, so the neuroscience of human brain is not helping me to become empathetic on the social media. So this is the problem. This is the problem. Of course, the solution is when you become, and okay, solution we are going to see after some time. So right now I'm just building the case. So the first is we all have the natural competence to be empathetic. We all have the natural competence. Okay, it is hidden. I'm not saying it is very, say, active competence, right? So it is a passive competence to understand the thoughts, feelings, and the emotions in the other person's mind. So this is our natural competence, what the Mother Nature has given to us. Empathy and in 21st century is taking a backseat because of less face-to-face physical human connection, and we being on the social media wherein the emotions are getting put in a very broad bracket, and we are not going into the depth of the nuances of the emotions and the feelings. And also our neuroscience is not helping us in the 21st century's social media age to become more empathetic. So these are important point what I uh, want to put on the table, which is a point as well as a solution. So in the empathy in 21st century, I'm not putting the solution in the table now. Of course, in the during the session we will come to that particular point, but right now in this I'm also putting the solution on the table. See, empathy is directly proportional to your behavioral intelligence. If you are behaviorally intelligent, automatically you enhance your empathy as well as social skills. Automatically. It's a result. What is the process? Process is behavioral intelligence. What is the result? Result is empathy and social skills. How? Okay. So now, before that, I will first go to the psychological conditioning, what each one of us has, which basically causes us to not to be empathetic. Right. First, I will go for that, and then I will go for the behavioral intelligence. Because behavioral intelligence is a very simpler thing, and most of you must have already watched that particular 55 minutes behavioral intelligence webinar clip. So you already know DISC and the foundations of the behavioral intelligence. What is our psychological conditioning, especially in relation to empathy I'm talking about, right? So right now our focus is on empathy and not on all the aspects. For example, if in my childhood I have been raised in a competitive environment, and I have been raised in an environment which has developed a mindset of competition in me, that is I must win and I must come first in the class and all that, which is the general case in our society. That is, we want our kids to come first and excel and all that. That conditioning automatically reduces my empathy. Why? Because I'm only thinking about myself. I'm only thinking about excelling. I'm only thinking about coming first. I coming first means other person should not come first, na. Other person has to come second or below that, right? So this particular competitive culturing, right, is basically reducing the empathy quotient in us. So we are getting conditioned. So this is my one point on the conditioning. My another point in conditioning is like this. For example, again, means all are generic examples. I fully understand there are few families and few individuals right? So who do not do believe in say gender and the variety of the things I'm talking about. I'm talking in a generic sense. So take it in a generic sense. For example, what is the another conditioning? Another conditioning is boys should not cry, for example. Now the boys should not cry. That means the boys are conditioned not to show their emotions. The girls should not do XYZ things, mean the girls are conditioned not to show their emotions in that particular aspect. So somehow our cultural conditioning or the upbringing is for withholding the emotions, not in favor of expressing the emotions. They are not in favoring of emotional intelligence. They are in favor of rational intelligence. Right. So this is also one of the conditioning. That is, male always wants to show that how we are strong. We don't cry. Right. So means we don't get hurt easily. Right. But internally there are problems. Of course, it is common sense. There is no, because we are all human beings, right? We all have the, means our cognitive neuroscience is very clear, right? Whether it is male or female, right? Everybody is emotional. Everybody has same amygdala, same limbic system, same reptilian brain, blah, blah, blah. Everything has same thing, right? But because of the conditioning, we basically try to express less emotions. And I have already told you the 4 conditions of empathy. See, so there is a link, right? So why first I told you four conditions of the empathy? Because the empathy definition is not only related to you putting yourself into the other person's shoes, right? It is related to the variety of the aspects. So one of the aspect is how in a social setting you are expressing your emotions, right? Sensibly, right? So sensible reaction or the sensible response in the social setting. So we are not in a position to do it sensibly and authentically, right? Because one of the conditions or the pointers of the empathy was also authenticity. So the people withhold them. And once you withhold them, you condition your brain. Okay, okay, no, 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 no. So for me, I don't cry. I don't feel like this. So you give this kind of suggestions to the brain, and the brain thinks that this is the reality. And then you become less sensitive towards that things. You suppress that particular emotion. Now you imagine, if you are not in a position to understand your own emotion, where is the question of you understanding the emotion of the other person and putting yourself into that other person's shoes, feelings, mind and heart and all that things? It is not possible, right? Because everything should start with yourself. If you are self-aware, then there is a possibility that you will understand the other person. You yourself don't know about you. So where is the question of you knowing other person? Common sense, right? Common sense, logic, rational. So our conditioning is a problem. And since there is a problem, there has to be the solution. We will talk on that. And you also all will be more now conscious towards our own upbringing. So if you have the children or you are going to have the children, so you should be sensitive towards that. That is how these kind of conditionings plays an important role into the attachment theory, into the psychological development, into the belief system, into the suppression of the emotions. Then the developed person is not the whole human being. It's a part of the human being, right? So there is a solution to this. The solution to this is to understand that there are different behavioral profiles. And one of the simplest mechanism is the disc. I'm not saying it is the only mechanism or the bestest of the best mechanism, but it is one of the simplest and decent mechanism is what is my personal experience. Once you know, for example, now I will take example of the each of the behavioral profile style just to empathize with them. Again, our focus area is on empathy. Our focus area is not on the holistic behavioral flags or the behavioral profile. For example, there is a D person. The D person's behavioral pattern is not to express the feelings and emotions very easily, to talk about the work and not necessarily about the feelings and emotions, and to talk very straightforward, not necessarily mixing emotions and the feelings in the talk. This is the D person's behavioral profile. Are 100% of the D people, or the, means when I say the D person means the person who has the D percentage more, not necessarily 100% D is not what I am talking about. I am talking about as a profile, majority of the percentage is to the D. So this is, now we know as a students of the behavioral intelligence, now we know that the D profile means this is the person. Now when that person will talk to you comparatively bluntly, comparatively straightforwardly, comparatively only work related, not your emotions and feeling related, now you are in a much better position to empathize with that person, because now you know it is not that this person is talking only with me like this. It is the nature of that particular person. The nature itself is like this. Now with this particular knowledge, Gyan Yoga, right? So we already seen that ignorance causes error. Now if you don't know, how you will feel? Oh, this person is very brash and blunt, I don't like this particular person. Very insensitive human being. Especially if you are empathetic and sensitive, you will dislike that particular person. Why? Because you don't have this behavioral intelligence idea, right? Automatically, as a normal human being, you will dislike that particular person, and you will be not in a position to empathize with that particular person, right? But now with the knowledge of the disc, you will say, okay, now I understand that because of this particular dominance of the D in his particular behavioral pattern, he is or she is talking to me like this. That doesn't mean that she is only talking to me like this, or she is against me or something like that. It is her nature. Now it is very clear to you. For example, there is a person with a I behavioral profile. Right? So the person with a I behavioral profile will generally talk a lot, generally will come up with the creative ideas, generally would like to lead the group, generally would like social recognition, right? But at the same time, they might have excessive self-image about themselves, and in that particular process, they might not recognize other person's talent. They might, I people might talk a lot without giving opportunity to other people to talk. They might lack active listening. They might not go into the details, but they will have a very big picture and the idea. But when it comes to the detailing and when it comes to the last action point, they may not have that particular patience or that particular focus on the detailing, but they will have a good command on the ideas. Now, for example, you have that kind of boss or subordinate. Now you are in a much better position to empathize. Oh, this my boss is like this, talks a lot, do not go into the detail, right? Because he is a I behavioral. Now, this wisdom or the knowledge is giving you the power to empathize with the other person. If there is a S person in your life, right, and that person is touchy, because S people would express themselves with touch. You may not like it necessarily, right? Means if you are a different behavioral profile person, you don't like that particular touchy actions. But that is the nature of that particular person. That particular person is looking for one-to-one connection, right? That particular person is already sensitive, empathetic, right? Now you know, acha, oh, okay. So not that you should get offended by that particular person, because now you are looking at that particular person from that particular person's perspective. Okay, this person is touchy, or this person is like this because he is from the S. It is not that he wants to be something like that. For example, I'm just giving one example, right? Yes, people have wonderful qualities, they are loyal and they are team worker, and means they have the excellent qualities, right? But I've just given you one example. But now you are empathizing with the S person better. For example, if there is a C person or C persons in your life, they will always talk about the numbers, logic, rational analysis, finance, accuracy. They will critique you. Okay, this particular spelling is wrong. This, why there is no comma, this has to be capital and all that. You will say, what is this fellow here? I'm talking about this idea and the concept and all that, and he's talking about the placing and the commas and the dots and all that. Arey Baba, now you are not in a position to empathize, because you say that is okay. See the overall picture, see the power of this particular idea, and instead of that you are talking like this. But now you know, acha, 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 okay, he is the C behavioral pattern person, and that is the reason. Now you are in a much better position to empathize. So the empathy is directly proportional to your behavioral intelligence. If you lack behavioral intelligence, and if you do not know your own behavioral profile, and if you do not know behavioral pattern of the other people, right, it is difficult for you to empathize. But if you know this, it is much easier for you to empathize. Is the point what I want you to take home. The last point, which means I have introduced to this batch first time, means all the 4 points, means in this kind of detail, but especially the fourth point as well. So there are some percentage of people who are empaths, EMPATH, empath. Who are the empath? Empath people have this natural ability to connect with you and to understand your real emotions, understand how you exactly are feeling. And not only they understand it, they also feel it. When they will be with you, when the empath will be with you and you will be sad, because of that particular connection and the mirror neurons firing in the empath also will feel sad. So there are some percentage of the people within us who are very high on empathy naturally. It is, I'm not saying that they have read some books and attended some training program, and because of that they have developed this particular, because this is extreme. Extreme is also bad. Anything extreme is bad, right? So the extreme empathy is also bad. So these particular empaths, right, who have this natural tendency to connect with the other people very easily and also feel their feelings the way they are feeling, right? So there are some techniques for these empaths, how to manage their empathy constructively,